Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner Classics That's Non-Classics. This is episode number 1806 and Doubleshot number 1700. And what am I doing for my 1700 one-shot? Talk about two Daredevil Epic Collections. First up, I'm talking about Daredevil Epic Collection Volume 1, The Man Without Fear. Interesting title of this one. This book collects the first 21 issues of the very first volume, released in the 60s. Yep. Released in the period of April 1964 to October 1966. So basically covering most of the mid-60s here. And here's a fun fact for you when it comes to this particular book. This book is the only book, basically, only major new book released in 1965. And it was the only book this was about 8 years ago, I think this was, when Daredevil celebrated his 50th anniversary. He was the only character who celebrated 50 years that year. This year, it's 60 years of Spider-Man, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, several characters. Next year, it's basically 60 years Avengers of X-Men, and 2 years from now is basically Daredevil. Now, the writing in here is mostly by Stan Lee, Wallace Wood, and Danny O'Neill. There's a little bit here. Wood, of course, Wallace doing some of the artwork. John Romita Sr., the late Gene Cullen, Bill Everett, Joe Orlando, Jack Kirby, and Bob Powell. Now, in the case of who created Daredevil, the common, let's say, accepted creator title credits go to, the Stan the Man Lee and Wallace Wood. Now, basically, Lin Carr himself talked about this issue here, Daredevil number 1, released in 1964. Now, this issue is noteworthy for the debut of Daredevil, plus his backstory explored. We also see the debut of Karen Page, Fogg and Nelson, the law office of Nelson Murdoch, despite the fact it's actually changed over the years, basically his location, but this is the first time we see it. We see the sole appearance of a man known as The Fixer. Yes, The Fixer. That's what he's called. And by the way, it has nothing to do with the guy who appeared in Frank Miller's Holy Terror, or even the one who appears in Modern Day. This is pretty much in a way his sole physical appearance in the past. Yeah, he dies of a heart attack in the very first issue. This also is the debut of another one-shot character by the name of Battling Jack Murdoch, who is Daredevil's father. And here's a fun fact for you, his father here. Where's his mom? Mom is not mentioned here. Basically, Frank Miller created her for the Born Again storyline, where she's a nun. Yep. Now, I should also point something about Daredevil's costume. What do you think of Daredevil's costume? Think of red, double D's. Here he's yellow. And I kind of thought this was... I kind of forgot about this. Now, I thought this was the first 8 issues of the series where he basically had the costume. Turns out it was first 6 issues of the series. And each issue is mostly standalone. Mostly, anyways. Yeah, basically, Daredevil trying to make his public debut by taking down a guy who was responsible for his father's death. And he basically beats a bunch of bad guys up in a gym. And his appearance is somewhat random at best. And Karen Page here is introduced as a love interest initially for Foggy, but later on she became Matt Murdock's girlfriend. In case you're wondering, did Fogg and Nelson in the first issue find out that Matt Murdock is Daredevil? No, this would not happen until years later. Yep. Yeah, so it explores his backstory, which has mostly been still but kept canon to this very day, where he was a kid. When he was a kid, his father was a boxer, and of course the whole thing with the chemicals covering his eyes to give him the radar sense. That part of his backstory still remains true, and it's been shown twice in live action. Yes, twice. The whole thing with the chemicals. In the Daredevil movie, it was chemicals on a truck that basically was hit by a forklift. In the Netflix show, It was simple. Basically, Daredevil got blind while saving an old man from being run over by a truck full of chemicals. Oddly enough, in the Netflix show, for some reason, they made a retcon where that very same truck was responsible for giving Jessica Jones her powers. Yeah, the flying super strength. Yep. Now, portions of his backstory has been changed over the years. But him getting his powers, his father dying, who his father is. Basically, some portion of his backstory is still there. But they've changed some of it over the years, including stuff with ninjas. Yes. Also, Daredevil started out with a single D in his outfit. Later, he had another D and it changed to red. In the book, there's no explanation exactly why he changed it to yellow. So, when you read the first issue, it's mostly conceive it as the pilot episode of a TV show. Just introducing the characters, so the concept, exploring the main character's backstory, something like that. That's mostly what the first issue is used for. Yeah. In the second issue, he fights his first cosmic villain, who is a Spider-Man villain. He fights Electro, one of like 2 or 3 times he fights the guy. Yep. Electro, which seems quite strange. Now, Daredevil, of course, uses the Billy Club, which I have heard this was actually the idea of Jack Kirby, which he does not get credited for that for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah, the first issue was responsible for the creations of Billy Club, which he still uses to the very day. We also get their appearance issued by The Thing. Yes. And we see Daredevil apparently keeps on his waist. So it's like, okay, beat a bunch of bad guys up and fight Electro. Odd issue per se. And here's a fun fact for you about Daredevil Electro. In this era, they only fought like a couple more times after this. Yeah, for some reason, Electro was guest starring in this book for some reason. Not really sure why. Then issue 3, you had the first original Daredevil villain, who is still around to this very day, the Owl. Yes, love this guy, Leland Owsley, who actually did make an appearance on Daredevil Netflix show, except he was not the Owl. Nope, he just basically was a accountant for the Kingpin. Yep. This issue mostly just his origin, just basically his first appearance, shows off his powers, and just a good introduction story to him, and shows off his lair. Which, by the way, you look at basically the top of his lair, you're thinking, wait, is that? Oh my gosh, is that the ship from Watchmen? It just by sheer coincidence it looks exactly like this. And oh, by the way, and here's the thing. The Owl can fly because of some artificial harness in him because he can't exactly walk very well. And apparently later on in the 70s, apparently some writer in the Spider-Man book decided to make him a rival for Dr. Octopus of all people. Yes. Yeah, it's quite strange. So, he fights the Owl's goons. The Owl himself, after this issue, will return 17 issues later in issue 20. And then issue 4, we have debut of a very familiar villain who made his live-action debut on the Jessica Jones show, played by David Tennant. Who is it? Zebediah Kilgrave, a.k.a. the Purple Man. Who, by the way, after this issue, never dressed in this stupid attire. He wore purple clothes over the years, but not this silly attire. Yes, the Purple Man. The man who can basically use his voice to manipulate any person he comes across to do whatever he wants. And, like, oh yeah, make his campaign. He just walks to a bank. Yeah. By the way, this is what we call Hurt Man. This is how the colors basically drew him. Yeah, later on, to be his skin purple. Very interesting issue this one is, and yeah, and by the way, guess who was responsible to make him an arch nemesis for Jessica Jones? Brian Michael Bendis. Yep. Despite the fact he has a long history with Daredevil, he hasn't fought him very much, surprisingly. Yeah, Portman is not that known of a Daredevil villain per se. He's mostly known in the last 20 years as being a Jessica Jones villain as well. But he started as a Daredevil villain. And here's the stupid thing, though. Despite his appearance on the Netflix show for Jessica Jones, Stan Lee did not make a cameo. Yeah, seriously. You saw his picture, but I'm like, what's wrong with physical appearance here? I don't know. It's kind of weird. And basically, he gets defeated by putting a sheet over him, like he's a member of the KKK. But it's basically to block his powers. That's mostly what it's used for. Mm-hmm. And if you're curious, though, when does Portman make his next special appearance? 9 to issue 88 of this book. So yeah, first appearance, August 1964. Does make his return 8 years later. No, seriously. Which seems so strange. Yeah. At one point, Birdman was dead. Yeah, he got killed off at the end of Jessica Jones. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he basically played a small role in the recent storyline, The Devil's Reign. Yep. Yeah, very interesting-ish first issue this one was for Purple Man. Yeah, but it seems strange though. Great character, but next appearance out for 8 years. And then we have issue 5 fights the Masked Marauder. Yeah, not a very well-known villain. Yes. There's been a couple guys who he's basically fought with this guy. This name. Yeah. The Marauder. Doesn't make his return until the annual, which came out 4 years after this thing. Yep, and after that, not until issue 129. Mm-hmm. And the thing with the Matador is, he didn't really appear very much over the years. Here's the weird thing. The guy appeared 12 times over the years. 12 times. Yeah, appeared in 5, 12, an issue of Smash. Yeah, it was kind of weird he appeared here. It's a strip. The end of for Daredevil, and then he appeared for issue 129. He appeared for 2 issues of U.S. Agent. His last physical appearance was a flashback for All New Hawkeye number 6. This was volume 2, number 6. And that was the last time I saw the guy. And this was the original guy who took him named the Marauder. Well, technically he's the second one, but he was the one people will tend to be somewhat familiar with. Yeah, and then of course they had one that Brubaker created in recent years. Only appeared a few times. And of course there was the original one who only appeared for 1 issue. Yeah, he's not the big of a villain, and all he is basically a guy who basically can take on bulls, and he fights Daredevil for 1 issue. It's no wonder why Daredevil never fought this guy again. The guy is pretty much a joke. Oh yeah, fight you once, and then basically never fight you ever again for years. Yeah, don't fight you again for about 3 years, and after that, not for another 8. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting issue per se, good action, but it's not something very noteworthy. And then we have debut of the first group of villains there to fight issue 6. The Fellowship of Fear, formed by the very first Mr. Fear, along with Eel and Ox. By the way, this is Ox right after his appearances in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah. Yeah. The Fellowship of Fear only appeared in just this issue. No, seriously. Yeah. This was the first appearance of the original Mr. Fear, who got killed off several years later. Mm-hmm. I mean, he died in issue 55. Yeah. Yeah, apparently he died at some point. Mm-hmm. His real name is Zoltan Drago. And it's like, apparently he died in issue 12. Actually, was there as a flashback. Yeah, and then he just shows up a couple times after that, but yeah, he's meant to be dead in issue 55. So, in the case of the eel was a character who was a Human Torch villain. No, seriously. And he died about 13 years after his debut. This is just roughly just a few years. Yeah, and prior to this, prior to appearing in this issue of Daredevil, he briefly appeared in 2 issues of Strange Tales. And you know the weird thing about the eel? This is the only time he's fought Daredevil. While Ox would fight him a few times after this. This, of course, is the original one, Raymond Block. Later on, they replaced it with his brother. He returned for issue 15, which I'll get to that. And then he popped up again in issue 86. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for some reason, the original Ox liked appearing by himself after, like, he fought Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Yep. But yeah, Fellowship of Fear, very first group of villains that Daredevil fights, later on replaced by the Emissaries of Evil. No, seriously. Yep. But interesting idea, have Daredevil fight 3 villains. One of whom is a villain he would fight a couple more times after this one. And then, of course, you also have a Spider-Man villain and a Human Torch villain. Yep. But this was a really good standalone issue when it comes to Daredevil. And this will also be the last time anybody saw the yellow costume, because issue 7, he gets to fight with freaking Namor. And by far, one of the most well-written issues of the whole series. Basically, you have Namor, who wants to basically sue the human race for pollution. And he basically talks Human Torch, and of course, he talks the Sub-Marnier out of basically trying to sue, and then, like, cause a rampage, arrest him, and then he basically leaves. But it's a great issue overall. And by the way, when Daredevil appears in the red costume, it is completely random. It's like, oh, previous issue, yellow costume here. It's like, oh, it's red. Yep. Issue 8, debut of another villain who actually still appears this very day, despite the fact this guy died. He got killed by the freaking Punisher. Wilbur Day, the Stilt Man. Yep. And by the way, let me show what this guy looks like. He still looks like this for some reason. Yeah, he looks like this older guy. Yes, for some reason. He's looked like this since the freaking 60s. And mostly this is about getting back his invention. You know, he basically stole anyways. It's a very interesting issue per se. And at least Leah basically is teasing a romance between Karen Page and Matt Murdock. Despite the fact that Foggy really wants her, but he ends up with somebody else. Very interesting issue. I love the Stilt Man. Absolute great villain. Very underrated. How did he die per se? Well, he got his legs blown out by a freaking bazooka. And then he got shot in the head by the Punisher. And remained dead for about 10 years until he was cloned. Yep. But he's still around. Still an old man. Yeah. He fought Daredevil constantly, including fighting Thor. His most recent appearance was the issue of Iron Man, of all things. Yes, Iron Man. And here's a fun little factor for you. Okay, the last time he appeared in a Daredevil comic book was in Daredevil Volume 3, number 17. But that was in a flashback. But physically, present day stuff in the pages of Daredevil was in, not that one, was back in Daredevil number 41. Mm-hmm. Which was also the debut of Daredevil's, well, now ex-wife. Yeah. But by far, like, well, writing wise, it seems like though we got some okay issues to start with, and then by this is like this issue one's like a bit slow down. Owl was interesting, a bit dip for the next like several okay stories, but wow, 7 8 really good. And then we have something very interesting happen in issue number 9. It's mostly a standalone issue where it features characters who, as far as I can tell, never appeared in Daredevil ever again. It's weird. It's like we have this guy called Cruz Kruger who appears just for this issue, and that's it. It's a weird issue. It's a pretty much unforgettable issue. It's something like, okay, just let's throw a random issue for Daredevil, which is not exactly a very good issue. Just Daredevil go on vacation, ends up in medieval stuff. The best thing about this issue is the artwork. Yeah. But it's a weird issue. I think it's Daredevil. Daredevil's supposed to be weird. Not really. And after that, then we get something very interesting. Where he fights another group of villains over the course of 2 issues. In Daredevil number 10, we have the debut of more villains in a 2-part storyline that starts issue 10. It's known as the Organization, which is made of Catman, Frogman, Birdman, Ape-Man, and a guy called the Organizer. Yeah, it's a very interesting storyline this one is. Oh yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here's the weird thing about this group. Like, after this issue, here's the weird thing about this. Like, after this 2-parter, the group will return in 1975, where they were brought up by Count Nefaria, and it's like, okay, the first appearance is in August 1965. After this quick 2-parter, doesn't appear again for 10 years. No, seriously. It is by far one of the most laughable things about these group of characters. Yeah, and they next appear in the pages of X-Men of all places, which seems so weird and baffling, to say the least. Excuse me, no, this Frogman, the original Ant-Man, Anti-Man, that's what they're called, basically the original organization. Yeah, the original group, all died in issue 116 of Iron Man. Yep. It's a great mystery story, and that says something a little bit later on, but just absolute great thing. The original organizer was a guy, they revealed in issue 2, was a guy by the name Abe Jenkins, and it has a woman named Deborah Harris. Yep. Yeah. But the woman, Deborah Harris, becomes a very seminal character. Basically appears on and off over the course of for a while, until her last physical appearance was in issue 222 of Daredevil in 1985. That was the last time she physically appeared in the book. Mm-hmm. Yep. She didn't die. They had to basically just go with somebody else. Yeah, as for the organizer, well, I don't think they had anybody else took this name. Just this one guy who appears in these 2 issues. Hauled out the jail, but it's an absolute great 2-parter. And does set up something basically where in this two-parter, where it says it's basically identify a masked villain whose identity is a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an absolute great two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's followed by something interesting. What is it, you might ask? A three-parter. Yes, a three-parter where we explore Ka-Zar's backstory. Yeah, Ka-Zar previously appeared in issue 8 of X-Men prior to this very two-parter. This three-parter. Oh, yeah. It was X number 10. That was his previous appearance. And here he is, appearing just 8 months later. And this issue also was the first appearance of a guy known as the Plunderer. Yep, the Plunderer. Yes, who by the finale does put on his familiar Plunderer costume. Now, pretty much the whole point of this three-parter is basically explore Ka-Zar's backstory. Makes sense that Lee be the one to do it because after he did create the character. And pretty much basically with this three-parter, now at first basically Ka-Zar spoke broken English. Then of course later on, after finding out he's actually son of a noble, he actually speaks regular English, and his brother becomes a recurring character in his books for years. But here's the thing: what was Ka-Zar's next physical appearance after this two-parter? Well, he appeared in issue 24 of the same book. And then he appeared in Spider-Man. Yeah. Plunderer himself, basically, after the three-parter, would also appear in that later issue. But yeah, he's still around. He's still a villain. And though his last physical appearance today was actually in U.S. Avengers number 10. Yeah, that was the last time I saw the guy. 15 was the return of Ox, which basically at the end of this standalone issue, yeah, 15 was mostly a standalone issue, which led to Ox falling off a roof and apparently dying.
Mm-hmm.
Though he did return many years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now here's the thing. 10 and 11 were the first ever two-part of the series. 12, 13, first three-part, and now we're back to a standalone issue, or just basically Daredevil versus Ox for an issue.
Mm-hmm.
What ends with basically him falling off a roof, and apparently dying. In issue 16, which by the way, love this cover by Wallace Wood. Yep, this was actually the first time Daredevil had encountered Spider-Man since issue 16 of Amazing Spider-Man, which was released, I think, like a year prior to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. This issue is also the debut of the Masked Marauder. Who is Masked Marauder, you might ask? He is a character who also appeared on the pages of Peter Parker to with Spider-Man. He is the leader of the manga. Basically, it's international mafia. That's simply put, basically, what his role is. International mafia. He's the leader of the group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's pretty much like, he's leader of the New York, well, one of the versions anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the thing. Who is this guy? His real name is Frank Furnham. Yeah, he's mostly appeared in pages of Daredevil as a recurring character. He appears as two-parter, returns in 19, and appears in 22 to basically on off like 26. Appears in Iron Man, and then appears back in Spider-Man. His last physical appearance, like after 28, he did appear again for decades. Like he stops being the character in issue 28 of Peter Parker Second with Spider-Man, and doesn't return until issue 4 of Volume 2 of Punisher War Journal in 2007. Roughly 28 years after his previous appearance. And he appeared one more time after that in issue of Secret Invasion. And that was it for the guy. I like this character. I like the whole mysterious mask thing. That's one thing I do like about this character. And It's just an absolute really good two-parter. But it seems strange that we just came off a two-parter back to a two-parter again. Yeah, but I like this whole stuff here with the International Crime with Jameson. You could say this two-parter is mostly just a guest star appearance from Spider-Man for just a quick two-parter. Yeah, absolute great issue. Great two-parter. In the case of issue 18, this debut of a character who is still somewhat around despite the fact he's somewhat insane. The Gladiator, Melvin Porter. Yep. Who is in fact a tailor. Yeah, he's basically a costume designer. Yep. And as far as I can tell, he's mostly appeared in pages of Daredevil over the years. That's mostly been his role. He's mostly about Daredevil because of his hallucinations that he's fighting for the Emperor. He's an absolute great character, and his most recent appearance actually in an annual from the Charles Show run. Yeah, but love this character. Most people you can think of as a guy with wrist blades. And the guy's appearances, he appeared a lot in Daredevil over the years. But his appearances outside of Daredevil were rare at best. But it seems like, though, like once basically the book hit 100 for Volume 2, he appeared like 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 appearances after. Like after Daredevil Annual, like aside of the 2 Daredevil Annuals, his most recent appearance was issue 3 of the current volume of Iron Man. That was simply his most recent appearance to date. And this issue here leads issue 19 with Marauder teaming up with the Gladiator for a standalone issue. Yeah, it's basically you just have Daredevil take on the underworld just like Spider-Man did around the same time. It's called Fighting Crime. What do you expect? Yep. Yeah, and after this issue, we have a two-parter. Yes, 20 and 21. We have a rematch with the Owl for a quick two-parter. Yeah. Yeah. Fights him for the next couple issues. And that's it. That's literally all that happens in this one trade alone. Yep. Absolute classic issues for Daredevil, and I can't wait to review Volume 2 at some point. I give this book a 10 out of 10. Absolute great book. Alright, moving on to Volume 14, which is actually the volume that came before the last volume I reviewed before Volume 1, which was, what is the name of that book? I have it on here. That book was, Last Rites. Yep. We have the trade that came out just before that one. We have Volume 14, Heart of Darkness. Stan Lee is no longer here. He left the book not long after. Yeah, he basically got replaced with several writers. You basically have in these issues, you have Jerry Conway, Gregor Wright, Ann Nintente, Mike Barron, Peter David, Peter Sanderson, Jim Starlin, and Ron Martz. Peter David does one of there's some Angels publishing here. I'll get to that. We also have Mark Bagley, Jeremy Jr., Ron Larnty, Neil Henderson, Cam Kennedy, Angel Medina, Rob Lem, Jim Lee, Richard Pacino, Gary Hartle, John Sutton, and Michael Barr. Yeah, Daredevil issues were released in this book. Came out from October 1989 to June 1990. Basically covers the main Daredevil book, issues 271 to 282. While also covering annuals 5, 6 for the series. Also Punisher in number 3 and Incredible Hulk in number 6. Talk about those 4 annuals, last 3 annuals first. Punisher, Daredevil, and Incredible Hulk, and of course also Silver Surfer as well. That's a 4-parter where you have this creature's life form taking each of these characters. The first 2 makes absolutely no freaking sense. First, this creature takes on the Punisher of all people, which that seems crazy. The Punisher taking on aliens. Then you have Daredevil fighting the guy, and then you have fighting Hulk and Silver Surfer, which those to make more sense than the first 2. First, we have Atlantis Attacks from Annual 5. Yeah, him fighting Tyrannus, who is a Hulk villain. Yeah, and most of this is just a Jerry Conway with Mark Valley. I think this is actually a really interesting story. It's mostly just basically Pluto gathering brides and basically launch a full-scale attack on Earth. That's what the story is. Basically, but the rest of the stuff in the annual, aside from this, there's not much else in here. It's mostly also Saga of Separate Crown, which leads to a crossover happens long after this one. And we finally start with the main Daredevil book. We have Daredevil, and of course, this book, all the issues you remember by Ann Nocenti, mostly. We have basically just Daredevil in the country. There's no Foggy, just Daredevil in costume. First, he takes on this random woman who he's stalking, who's got explosives. Who basically is wearing like an 80s exercise outfit you see in those 80s exercise videos. Yep, and then by the way, I'm going to skip a few issues in here because those were Action Adventures issues. We have this one person here. Yeah, and she kind of falls for Ultron a little after this. And we have this redheaded woman named Brandy. Yes, Brandy. Mm-hmm. I know she appears for a small handful of issues. Her name is Brandy Ash. And she's only around for a brief... She's only here just for the issues published in this book. And then she dies. She gets killed off in Daredevil issue 282. Yeah, they kill her off. Now, this issue also debut of a character named Shotgun. Yes, it's a character named Shotgun. And he's an Andy Nocenti character. Yeah, he appears for the opening 3 issues of this book. And then he appears in Punisher War Journal for the opening 6 issues of that book. Appears in the final issue of Punisher War Journal Volume 1. And sporadically appears also for the Bullseye miniseries. His last appearance was in Old Man Logan, Volume 2, number 44-45. And can you believe this character only first appeared back in 1989? Yeah. We have a guy appears here named Skip Ash, who appears for like 9 issues per se. And it's mostly most of the issues except for one published in this book. Yeah. But this book also has the debut of a character named Number 9, who is a cheerleader who basically teams up with Ultron for a few issues. And she appears mostly in all the issues published in this book except for issue 83. And she also appears in issue of Fantastic Four Unlimited. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, basically just Number 9 just wander about, and all of a sudden we go to the Inhumans. Yes, the Inhumans. No, Charles Schulzer was not the first time the Inhumans basically popped up in Daredevil. Popped a lot earlier than that. These issues are kind of odd to say the least, because it's Daredevil now, and they're basically on the countryside fighting various random foes. Like Shotgun. This is Shotgun. Yes. I know some people like the Ann Nocenti issues, but I've never been the biggest fan of them. Not really. No, not really. After finding Shotgun for these 3 issues, and then for issues 74 and 75, he ends up fighting Ultron in the Axe Adventures tie-in. Mm-hmm. Of course, you have more Inhumans in here. And that's just the opening few issues. And then, of course, you have 75, 76, which is the Axe of Vengeance tie-in for this book. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry it's going quite long, but there's a lot to talk about here. Yep, and then with issue 77, where we basically have debut of Blackheart. Yes, Blackheart. Who is Blackheart, you might ask? Well, he is Mephisto's son. Who makes his debut just prior to this one. Yep. And basically, you have Daredevil fighting this guy for like several issues. Yes, a demon who fights Daredevil, which is, like I said, it's weird. And the remaining issue is basically just him versus Daredevil. He probably pops up in their books. Mm-hmm. But that is literally the issues themselves. Mm-hmm. These issues bad? Not necessarily. They're interesting to say the least, but it's not much to write home about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's literally what happens. There's really good character stuff in here, but I really missed the Foggy Nelson stuff. Yeah. And then for some reason I have Daredevil move to the countryside. I don't know why, but she did. Yep. And keep this book, despite the fact being an epic collection, only collects 12 issues of the series, plus 2 annuals and three annuals from three of the annuals from 3 different series. I mean, I get collecting those annuals because it's part of the Lifeform crossover, but it seems kind of small for this book. Maybe because the annuals basically filled the size of this book. That's possible. I give this book roughly a 9 out of 10. It's interesting to say the least. Okay, so that is definitely it. I'm not going for quite a while for this one, but excuse me. Last day I will talk about. So next comic corner, don't know yet, but won't be Daredevil. That won't happen probably not until 2 episodes after this one. Okay, next video. Bye.